Blue alien tears rolled down Kazral's face as Austin pulled him free from the outpost's wreckage. The human had come back, saving hundreds of trapped Sheliak workers from certain death. Austin stared at the sobbing 7-foot insectoid in disbelief. Austin Lewis, age 35, was just another human engineer scraping by in the outer colonies. He'd taken a job at this remote Sheliak mining outpost, orbiting Zeta Orionis 6, extracting minerals from the gas giant's moons. Dangerous, demanding work. But as one of only 10 humans among 250 Sheliak, Austin stood out. The giant bugs looked down on humans, often misunderstanding them. Austin had to be twice as good to earn any respect, especially from his blunt supervisor, Kazral. But Austin's skill and smarts had won over a few colleagues. He was elbow-deep in a broken ore refinery when alarms blared across the facility. Austin found Kazral, who explained grimly that an unknown object had emerged from the planet's atmosphere on a collision course with the outpost. They had mere hours to evacuate. As the object's gravity distortions triggered catastrophic system failures, over half the Sheliak found themselves trapped in the central processing facility. The bug-like aliens were tough, but their exoskeletons couldn't take the searing heat in the facility's core. They'd cook in minutes. Someone had to go in and free them. But that would mean staying behind, likely dying, as the object struck. The Sheliak rescue teams shied away from the suicide mission. All eyes turned to the lone human. Austin stared back at his alien crewmates, pulse racing. No one expected him to volunteer. These workers weren't even his species. But he stepped forward. "I'll do it." Kazral protested, but Austin was their only shot. He suited up and headed into the inferno, not knowing if he'd make it out alive. Austin wasted no time. He'd spent hours maintaining his personal exosuit, ensuring it was ready for emergencies like this. The heavily reinforced suit could withstand extreme heat, frigid cold, and the vacuum of space. He pulled it on, running the SEALs through their checks. Grabbing his helmet, Austin snagged his tool belt, attaching a portable plasma cutter. It would slice through the toughest bulkheads. He sprinted out of the locker room, heading for the central facility. The tremors were getting worse. Austin struggled to keep his footing as the deck shook. Ahead, a familiar blue shape appeared. It was Lyra, one of the Sheliak trainees he'd been mentoring. "Wait," Lyra called, her voice carrying over the din of twisting metal. "I'm going with you." "No way, it's too dangerous," Austin replied, not breaking stride. "You need me," Lyra insisted, moving to block his path. "I know that facility inside and out, every system and relay. You want to reach the control room fast? I can get you there." Austin hesitated. Another powerful jolt nearly took them off their feet. He didn't have time to argue. "Fine, stay close and do exactly as I say." Lyra nodded and fell in behind him as they navigated the disintegrating outpost. Corridors had become obstacle courses of broken conduits and collapsed ceilings. They clambered over piles of rubble. Austin used the cutter to slice through sealed blast doors, the molten edges glowing white-hot. When they reached the processing facility, Austin's blood ran cold. The roof had partially caved in, opening the structure to the planet's toxic atmosphere. A noxious yellow haze poured in through the gaps. "Hull breach," Lyra cried. "The temperature in the control room will be rising fast. They'll die if we don't hurry." Together they cut and crawled their way through the wreckage. Austin's face was slick with sweat inside his helmet. The cutter weighed heavily in his hands. Just a bit further. A deafening screech ripped through the complex as it lurched violently to the side. The walkway in front of Austin buckled. To his horror, Lyra tumbled forward, disappearing through a widening gap with a piercing shriek. "Lyra!" Heart hammering, Austin lunged for the opening, arm outstretched. His gloved hand found Lyra's, locking tight around her wrist. The Sheliak scrabbled at the jagged edge with her other hand, kicking frantically. Austin gritted his teeth, muscles burning as he hauled the alien up. Even in this gravity, her exoskeleton was heavy, but he wouldn't let go. With a final heave, he dragged Lyra back onto solid ground. They lay there, chests heaving, Austin's head swam, his body pushed to its limits. But they couldn't stop. Forcing himself upright, he pulled Lyra to her feet. "Almost there," he rasped. "Let's finish this." At last they stumbled to the control room doors. Through the small window, Austin could see dozens of Sheliaks slumped over consoles or huddled together. The searing heat was taking its toll. Many had already succumbed to heat stroke. They didn't have much time. Austin hit the door controls while Lyra connected her datapad, frantically trying to override the lockdown. The Sheliak inside stared at them with compound eyes filled with panic and desperation. "Shall we have to seal off this room?" Austin shouted over the alarms, his mind racing. He scanned the battered control room, taking in the huddled Sheliak, the gaping hole in the ceiling, the acrid yellow haze pouring in. There, on the far wall, the heavy emergency bulkhead, designed to hermetically isolate the chamber in a crisis like this. But the damn thing was stuck halfway, jammed by debris from the partial collapse. "The emergency bulkhead!" Lyra exclaimed, her thoughts mirroring his. "If we can get it closed, it would buy us some time until a rescue team reaches us. The Sheliak might be able to survive in there, with the breach sealed and life support stabilized." Austin nodded grimly. "I see the manual override lever there on the opposite wall, but in this heat, this atmosphere—" He glanced at the suffering Sheliak. Their iridescent exoskeletons were already darkening from the scorching temperatures, their movement slow and labored. They'd never make it across the room. "You could, though," Lyra said urgently, her compound eyes boring into him. "Your exosuit can handle it, at least for a little while." Lyra squeezed his arm, then turned to her datapad, pulling up schematics. "You'll need to cross the room to the override lever," she said, tracing the path with a slender appendage. "Once you've got the bulkhead shut, there's an access panel nearby. I'll guide you through the process of jump-starting the emergency systems." Austin squared his shoulders, staring across the treacherous expanse of the control room. Fallen beams, sparking wires, clouds of noxious gas. He grabbed a length of cable and clipped it to his suit, motioning for Lyra to hold the other end. A lifeline. With a deep breath of filtered air, he stepped out into the hellish scene. The heat was immediate and intense, pressing against him like a physical force. He could feel it even through his suit's insulation. Gritting his teeth, Austin began to pick his way across the room, following Lyra's directions. He was halfway there when a sudden burst of superheated gas erupted from a ruptured conduit directly ahead. Searing pain shot through his body as he stumbled back, shielding his faceplate with his arms. Warning lights flashed inside his helmet. The temperature spike had damaged his suit's cooling system. Austin could feel the sweat pouring down his face, his skin burning. Every breath was a struggle, the air in his suit growing hotter by the second. Black spots swam in his vision. But he couldn't stop, not with so many lives hanging in the balance. He forced himself onward, staggering the last few meters to the override lever. Reaching out with a trembling hand, he grasped it and pulled with all his remaining strength. The bulkhead groaned and shuddered, then began to slowly slide shut. Just as it slammed home with a resounding clang, a heavy pipe came crashing down, striking Austin's shoulder with a sickening crunch. Choking back a scream, he fumbled for the access panel Lyra had described. "I'm there," he gasped into his comm. "Tell me what to do." With Lyra's guidance, he managed to input the sequence that would restart the life support. A deep hum filled the room as ventilation fans whirred to life, the toxic haze beginning to dissipate. The Sheliaks stirred, their clicks and chirps rising in volume as they realized what was happening. Austin sagged against the wall, his vision tunneling. He'd done it. They were safe. As the room faded to black around him, he dimly registered the sound of Lyra shouting his name, the sensation of hands on his body. Then, nothing. Lyra knelt beside Austin's unconscious form, her mandibles clicking rapidly as she worked to repair his damaged exosuit. The rescued Sheliak gathered around, their iridescent exoskeletons glinting in the control room's emergency lighting. Zortak, an elder Sheliak with a mottled green carapace, stepped forward. "Let me help," he said, his voice a gentle buzz. "I have something that may aid his recovery." Zortak leaned over Austin, positioning his mandibles near the human's exposed skin. A viscous blue liquid began to ooze from the glands near his mouthparts. Carefully, he applied the substance to Austin's burns, spreading it with delicate movements of his appendages. Almost instantly, the angry red welts on Austin's skin began to cool and fade. The human engineer stirred, his eyes fluttering open as the pain receded. "It is Karval," Zortak explained, "a sacred substance among our people. It possesses great healing properties and is reserved only for those we hold in the highest regard." Before anyone could respond, a violent tremor shook the control room. Austin and the Sheliak struggled to keep their footing as the deck tilted beneath them. "The object!" Lyra exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. "Its gravitational pull is getting stronger. We're running out of time." Austin staggered to his feet, his mind racing. "The escape pods," he said urgently. "We need to get you all to the escape pods." Lyra shook her head, her antennae twitching. "But Austin, the pods are designed for Sheliak. They may not accommodate a human passenger." Austin set his jaw stubbornly. "Then I'll stay behind," he said. "I can use my engineering skills to divert the outpost's remaining power to the pods. It should give them enough juice to get you all to safety." The Sheliak chittered anxiously, clearly reluctant to leave the human behind. But as another jolt rocked the facility, sending sparks cascading from ruptured conduits, they began to see the wisdom in his plan. "Very well," Zortak said solemnly. "We will honor your sacrifice, Austin Lewis." The group began to move towards the escape pod bay, picking their way through the debris-strewn corridors. Austin and Lyra worked as they went, their hands flying over control panels and power junctions. "If we reroute the main grid through the auxiliary relays," Lyra said, her voice tight with concentration, "we should be able to boost the pod's launch systems." At last they reached the escape pod bay. The Sheliak began to file into the pods, their movements quick and precise. Austin and Lyra made the final adjustments to the power network, the hum of energy rising around them. Just as the last Sheliak was about to enter their pod, a deafening crack split the air. Austin looked up to see a section of the ceiling giving way, tons of metal and composite plummeting towards them. Towards Lyra. Without a second thought, Austin launched himself at the young Sheliak. He hit her with a flying tackle, the momentum carrying them both clear of the falling debris. But as they tumbled to the deck, Austin felt a searing pain lance through his body. The ceiling section crashed to the floor behind them, sending up a cloud of dust and sparks. Austin lay stunned, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. He could feel a warm wetness spreading across his chest, soaking through his exosuit. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her mandibles clicking in distress as she saw the jagged metal shard protruding from Austin's torso. Blue ichor, the Sheliak equivalent of blood, stained her appendages as she tried to stem the flow from the horrific wound. The human reached up with a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against Lyra's carapace. "Go," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the outpost's groaning superstructure. "Get to the pod. Save yourselves." Tears welling in her compound eyes, Lyra finally nodded. She gently touched her forehead to Austin's, a gesture of deepest respect and affection among the Sheliak. Then, with a last anguished look, she turned and ran for the remaining escape pod. As the pod doors sealed shut, Austin felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had done it, he had saved them. And in that moment, as the alien stars wheeled overhead and the outpost shuddered its last around him, Austin knew that he had found his true purpose. Lyra's compound eyes widened in horror as Austin's broken body slumped to the deck, blood pooling around the jagged metal shard impaling his chest. She scuttled to his side, her clawed appendages trembling as she checked his vital signs. Relief flooded through her exoskeleton as she detected a faint pulse. He was alive, but barely. "His exosuit is compromised," Lyra clicked urgently to the other Sheliak. "Life support failing." The elder Sheliak turned to the others. "Quickly, help me carry him to the escape pod. We must modify the pod's environment if he is to survive. 4 Sheliak grasped Austin's limp form, their strong arms lifting him with surprising gentleness. They carried him swiftly through the disintegrating outpost, ducking falling debris and skirting gaping holes in the deck. Lyra followed close behind, her mind racing. Inside the cramped escape pod, Zortak and the others laid Austin on the floor. Lyra immediately set to work on the pod's life support system, her appendages flying over the control panel. "I must stay with him," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "I can keep the modified systems running, ensure he has a chance." Zortak nodded solemnly. "Your bond with this human is strong, we understand." He placed a spindly hand on her shoulder. "May the Great Mother watch over you both." The other Sheliak boarded the remaining pods, each one pausing to touch their antennae to Austin's still form, in a gesture of profound respect. Then, with a hiss of hydraulics, the hatches sealed shut, and the pods blasted free of the crumbling outpost. In the dim light of the pod, Lyra worked frantically to stabilize Austin. She sealed the gash in his exosuit, pumping precious oxygen into his helmet. With delicate precision, she extracted the metal shard from his chest, packing the wound with Carval to stem the bleeding. As the hours dragged on, Lyra monitored Austin's condition, adjusting the pod's atmosphere and temperature to keep him alive. But he remained unresponsive, his face pale beneath the helmet's visor. Fear gnawed at Lyra's insides. She couldn't lose him, not like this. With shaking appendages, she activated the pod's communication system and began recording a message. "To the family of Austin Lewis," she began, her voice quavering. "My name is Lyra of the Sheliak. I want you to know of your son's bravery, his selflessness. He saved dozens of lives today, including mine, and I swear on the Great Mother herself that I will do everything to ensure he survives. He will return to you, this is my solemn vow." Tears streaked Lyra's carapace as she ended the recording. She turned back to Austin, grasping his hand in hers, and then a sound that made her heart leap, a low groan from Austin's throat. His eyelids fluttered open, unfocused gaze roaming the pod's interior. "Lyra!" he rasped, his voice thin and confused. "What? Where?" "Rest now," she whispered. "I will watch over you. We have a long journey ahead, but we will face it together." As Austin's eyes drifted shut once more, Lyra settled beside him, her mind already working on the challenges to come. They were adrift in the void, 2 unlikely companions bound by sacrifice and survival. But with Austin's strength and her own determination, Lyra knew they would find a way. Austin blinked, his vision slowly coming into focus as he took in the dim interior of the escape pod. Every muscle in his body ached, and the dull throb in his chest reminded him of the ordeal he'd just endured. He turned his head, catching sight of Lyra hunched over the pod's control panel, her slender appendages dancing across the screens. "Lyra?" he croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "What happened?" The Sheliak spun around, her compound eyes widening. "Austin, thank the Great Mother, you're awake." She scuttled to his side, gently helping him sit up. "After you sealed the bulkhead, you were struck by falling debris. We carried you to the escape pod just before the outpost collapsed." Austin's brow furrowed as fragmented memories surfaced. The searing heat, the toxic atmosphere, the desperate race to save the trapped Sheliak. "The others?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Safe," Lyra assured him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Thanks to you, they all made it to the escape pods in time. You saved them, Austin." Emotion welled up in Austin's chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and humility. He reached up, clasping Lyra's appendage in his own. "We saved them," he corrected softly. "I couldn't have done it without you." Lyra ducked her head, her antennae twitching with embarrassment. "I only did what was necessary. You were the one who risked everything to help us." Austin shook his head. "You stayed behind to keep me alive. I owe you my life, Lyra." The Sheliak engineer met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "And I owe you mine. We're in this together now, Austin. We'll find a way to survive, to get back home." Nodding, Austin pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the protests of his battered body. Together, he and Lyra began to assess their situation, taking stock of the pod's systems and supplies. "Looks like we have enough rations to last a few weeks," Austin said, examining the storage compartments. "But we'll need to find a way to replenish our water supply." Lyra tapped at the control panel, bringing up a schematic of the pod. The life support system is functioning, but it was designed for Shellyak physiology. "I'll need to make some adjustments to ensure it can sustain both of us." Austin peered over her shoulder, studying the diagram. "I might be able to boost the efficiency of the air scrubbers, give us a little more breathing room." He glanced at Lyra, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. No pun intended. Sobering, Austin turned his attention to the navigation system. "We need to figure out where we are and where we're going. The pod's propulsion is limited, but if we can find a nearby inhabited system—" He trailed off, his fingers flying across the console as he pulled up star charts and astronomical data. Lyra watched him work, marveling at the human's quick mind and resourcefulness. Hours turned into days as Austin and Lyra labored to keep the escape pod functioning. They took turns monitoring the systems, making repairs and rationing their supplies. In the quiet moments between crises, they talked. At first, their conversations were tentative, both of them unsure how to bridge the vast cultural divide between their species. But as time passed, they grew more comfortable with each other, sharing stories of their families, their homes, their dreams. Austin spoke of growing up on Earth, of the endless blue skies and rolling green hills of his childhood. He told Lyra of his fascination with machines, how he'd spent hours as a boy tinkering with engines and circuits, dreaming of one day building starships that could carry humanity to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. In turn, Lyra shared tales of her own upbringing on the Shellyak homeworld, a planet of towering crystalline spires and vast, shimmering deserts. She described the intricate social structure of her people, the elaborate rituals and customs that governed every aspect of their lives. As they talked, Austin and Lyra discovered a shared passion for engineering, a common language that transcended the barriers of biology and culture. They swapped ideas and theories, brainstorming ways to improve the pod's systems and increase their chances of survival. And somewhere along the way, amidst the long hours and close quarters, a bond began to form between them. It was a connection born of shared hardship and mutual respect, a recognition of the strength and resilience they saw in each other. On the fourth day of their journey, disaster struck. A small asteroid no larger than a grain of sand tore through the pod's hull, sending alarms blaring throughout the cramped space. Austin lunged for the control panel, his heart pounding as he scanned the readouts. "We're losing air pressure," he shouted over the klaxons. "The breach is in the aft section, near the power core." Lyra was already moving, snatching up a repair kit and heading for the damaged area. Austin followed close behind, his mind racing as he tried to calculate how long they had before the pod's atmosphere was depleted. They found the breach, a jagged hole no wider than a fingernail leaking precious air into the void. Working together, Austin and Lyra managed to seal the rupture, but not before a significant portion of their oxygen supply had been lost. Exhausted and shaken, they collapsed against the bulkhead, their shoulders touching as they caught their breath. Lyra nodded, her antennae drooping. "We'll have to be even more careful with our air now. Every breath counts." Austin glanced at her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "I'm glad you're here, Lyra. I couldn't do this without you." The Shellyak engineer met his gaze, her own expression softening. "We're a team, Austin. We'll get through this together." As the days stretched into weeks, Austin and Lyra faced a constant barrage of challenges. A malfunctioning power coupling threatened to leave them stranded in the darkness of space. A ruptured water tank forced them to ration their already meager supplies. A navigational error sent them drifting off course, adding precious days to their journey. But through it all they persevered, drawing strength from each other and their shared determination to survive. Austin's ingenuity and resourcefulness, combined with Lyra's technical expertise and calm under pressure, saw them through even the most daunting of obstacles. And as they worked side by side, their bond deepened, evolving from a simple partnership of necessity into something more profound. They found solace in each other's presence, a source of comfort and companionship in the lonely vastness of space. On the 23rd day, as Austin was running a routine diagnostic on the pod's sensors, a sudden blip on the screen caught his attention. He leaned forward, his heart quickening as he double-checked the readings. "Lyra," he called, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. "I think we've got something." Austin nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "It's on an intercept course, and the energy signature. It's Sheliak." Lyra let out a trilling chirp of joy, her antennae quivering with emotion. A rescue team, they must have been searching for survivors from the outpost. As the unknown vessel drew closer, Austin and Lyra watched the sensor readouts with bated breath. The minutes seemed to stretch into hours as they waited, hardly daring to believe that their ordeal might finally be coming to an end. At last the comm system crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the pod. "Escape pod, this is Captain Zarek of the Sheliak rescue ship Kirtan. We have you on our scopes. Please respond." Austin and Lyra exchanged a look of pure relief and elation. They were saved. As the Sheliak rescue vessel docked with the escape pod, Austin and Lyra found themselves surrounded by a flurry of activity. Medics swarmed in, carefully transferring the injured human to a waiting gurney. Lyra followed close behind, her compound eyes fixed on Austin's pale face. In the ship's infirmary, a team of Sheliak doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Austin's condition. They applied salves and bandages to his wounds, administered medication to combat infection, and closely monitored his vital signs. Lyra remained by his side, her presence a constant source of comfort. When Austin finally regained consciousness, he found himself lying in a soft bed, his body swathed in a strange, silky material. Lyra was perched nearby, her antennae twitching with relief. Austin managed a weak smile. "Thanks for not giving up on me." "Engineer Austin Lewis," Kaztar said, his voice a rumbling buzz. "I am honored to meet you. Your bravery has saved many lives today." Austin struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in his chest. "I only did what was right," he said. Kaztar nodded, his mandibles clicking together. "Your actions have not gone unnoticed. The other escape pods have been located, and their occupants are safe, and word of your heroism has spread throughout the Sheliak colonies. You have become a symbol of the growing friendship between our species." Austin felt a surge of emotion at the captain's words. He had never sought fame or recognition, but knowing that his efforts had made a difference filled him with a sense of purpose. As the rescue ship journeyed towards the Sheliak homeworld, Austin and Lyra found themselves treated as honored guests. They were given comfortable quarters, their every need attended to by the attentive crew. At mealtimes, they were invited to dine with Kaztar and his officers, sharing stories and learning about each other's cultures. Austin was fascinated by the Sheliak's complex social structure, their intricate system of castes and guilds. Lyra, in turn, was eager to learn more about human history and customs. They spent long hours in conversation, their bond deepening with each passing day. Even Kaztar, who had initially been wary of the human in their midst, found himself drawn to Austin's quiet strength and determination. The two formed an unlikely friendship, trading tales of their adventures and discussing the challenges of interstellar diplomacy. When the ship finally arrived at the Sheliak homeworld, Austin and Lyra were greeted by a sight they would never forget. Thousands of Sheliak lined the streets, their carapaces glinting in the sunlight as they cheered and waved. It was a hero's welcome, a celebration of the unlikely friendship that had blossomed between two species. As they made their way through the crowds, Austin spotted a familiar face. It was Zortak, the elder who had used the sacred Karval to heal his wounds. The old Sheliak approached, his steps slow but steady. "Austin Lewis," Zortak said, his voice filled with warmth. "It is good to see you again." He reached out, grasping Austin's hand in his own. "I have a gift for you," he said, pressing a small ornate vial into the human's palm. This is Karval, the sacred substance of our people. It is a symbol of our eternal friendship, a reminder of the bond we now share. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Austin had ever experienced. He and Lyra were led to a grand stage, where they knelt before the assembled Sheliak leaders. One by one, the elders stepped forward, placing crystalline medallions around their necks. "These are the Zorkal," Kaztar explained, his voice ringing out across the gathered crowds. "The highest honor our people can bestow, reserved for those who have shown exceptional bravery and selflessness." As the medallions settled against their chests, Austin and Lyra exchanged a glance. They had been through so much together, had faced death and emerged stronger for it. And now, as they stood before the cheering multitudes, they knew that their actions had helped to forge a new era of cooperation and friendship between their species. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to the power of compassion and understanding. And as Austin looked out over the sea of faces, he felt a sense of pride and purpose, knowing that he had played a part in bringing their worlds together. After the grand ceremony honoring their heroism, Austin and Lyra were approached by a delegation of high-ranking Sheliak officials. The group, led by Zortak, the wise elder Austin had come to respect, had a momentous proposal. They wished for the two engineers to remain on the Sheliak homeworld as ambassadors, acting as a bridge between their species and fostering the budding relationship between humans and Sheliak. Austin and Lyra exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. The offer was both humbling and daunting. They knew their experiences had forged a unique bond between them and the Sheliak, but the responsibility of representing humanity weighed heavily on their shoulders. "It would be an honor," Austin said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. Lyra nodded in agreement, her compound eyes shimmering with determination. The Sheliak delegation chittered with approval, their mandibles clicking in a gesture of satisfaction. Zortak stepped forward, placing a spindly hand on Austin's shoulder. "We have prepared living quarters for you in the capital city," he buzzed. "You will have access to all the resources you need to learn about our culture, our history, our technology. It is our hope that through understanding, we can build a lasting friendship between our peoples." In the days that followed, Austin and Lyra settled into their new roles. Their living quarters were spacious and comfortable, a fusion of human and Sheliak design that reflected the spirit of their mission. They spent long hours immersed in Sheliak databases, absorbing information about the alien civilization they now called home. But their work extended far beyond mere study. Austin and Lyra found themselves in constant meetings with Sheliak leaders, discussing everything from trade agreements to cultural exchange programs. They sat in on scientific conferences, marveling at the advanced technologies the Sheliak had developed, and brainstormed ways to collaborate on joint research ventures. It was exhilarating, exhausting work. Austin's mind buzzed with ideas, his enthusiasm tempered only by the occasional pang of homesickness. Lyra, ever perceptive, sensed his disquiet and took it upon herself to ensure they made time for exploration and discovery amidst their diplomatic duties. One day, during a rare moment of respite, Austin and Lyra found themselves wandering the winding streets of the capital city. The towering spires of Sheliak architecture glittered in the alien sunlight, casting prismatic reflections on the polished stone walkways. As they turned a corner, a burst of high-pitched clicking caught their attention. A group of Sheliak children, their carapaces still soft and unmarked by the rigors of adulthood, were huddled around a complex array of crystalline shapes, moving them about with intense concentration. Intrigued, Austin and Lyra approached the group. The children looked up, their compound eyes widening in recognition. "Ambassador Austin! Ambassador Lyra!" they chirped, their voices overlapping in excitement. "What are you playing?" Austin asked, kneeling down to get a better look at the intricate setup. The tallest of the children, a young male with a mottled green carapace, stepped forward. "It is called Zorkesh," he explained, his mandibles twitching with pride. "A game of strategy and cunning. Would you like to learn?" Austin glanced at Lyra. a grin spreading across his face. "Absolutely," he said. "Teach us." For the next several hours, Austin and Lyra sat with the Sheliak children, absorbing the complex rules of Zorkesh. They learned how each crystalline shape represented a different type of unit, how the color of the pieces denoted their strengths and weaknesses, and how the ever-shifting layout of the board required constant adaptation and creative thinking. As they played, Austin found himself marveling at the sophistication of the game. It was more than just a pastime. It was a tool for honing the mind, for developing the skills that would serve these young Sheliak as they grew into the leaders and innovators of their generation. An idea began to take shape in Austin's mind, a vision of a future where human and Sheliak children could learn and grow together. He turned to Lyra, his eyes alight with excitement. "What if we could create a joint educational program?" he asked. "A way for our children to learn from each other, to develop the skills they'll need to thrive in a galaxy where our species are united." Lyra's antennae quivered with enthusiasm. "It's a brilliant idea," she said. "We could design a curriculum that draws on the strengths of both our cultures, that fosters creativity and critical thinking and cross-species cooperation." Over the next several months, Austin and Lyra threw themselves into the development of the educational initiative. They worked closely with Sheliak leaders and educators, poring over lesson plans and educational philosophies, debating the merits of different approaches and activities. It was a daunting task, but one that filled Austin with a sense of purpose he had never known before. He saw in this project the potential for something truly transformative, a way to shape the future, not just for the Sheliak and humanity, but for all the species of the galaxy. And as he watched the first group of human and Sheliak children come together, their laughter and chatter filling the air as they bent over shared projects and puzzles, Austin knew that he had found his calling. Here, on this alien world, he was helping to build a bridge between two species, a foundation of understanding and cooperation that would stand the test of time. It was a legacy he could be proud of, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and the unshakable belief that, no matter how different they might seem, all sentient beings shared a common destiny among the stars. Austin and Lyra stood side by side, overseeing the latest session of the joint educational initiative they had worked so hard to establish. Human and Sheliak children sat together, their faces alight with curiosity and excitement as they tackled a complex engineering problem. Austin felt a swell of pride as he watched them collaborate, their differences forgotten in the pursuit of a common goal. A familiar chirping sound caught his attention, and he turned to see a Sheliak aide approaching, his antennae twitching with urgency. "Ambassador Austin," the aide said, "you have a visitor. Kazaral, from the Zorthak Mining Corporation, is here to see you." Austin's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't seen Kazaral since the fateful day on the mining outpost, when the Sheliak supervisor had been among those he'd rescued from certain death. He exchanged a glance with Lyra, who nodded in understanding, before following the aide to the meeting room. Kazaral stood as Austin entered, his exoskeleton gleaming under the room's soft light. "Austin Lewis," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "It's good to see you again." Austin grasped Kazaral's outstretched appendage, marveling at the strength and resilience of the Sheliak's grip. "Kazaral," he said, "this is a surprise. What brings you here?" Kazaral's mandibles clicked in the Sheliak equivalent of a smile. "I come bearing news," he said. "The Zorthak Mining Corporation has been following your work here on the homeworld, and they're impressed. They want to offer you a position, Austin, head of the Interspecies Engineering Division." Austin felt his heart skip a beat. "Interspecies engineering?" he repeated, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Kazaral nodded. "You would be overseeing collaborative projects between human and Sheliak engineers, developing new technologies that combine the best of both our species' knowledge and expertise." Austin's mind raced with the possibilities. He thought of the educational initiative, of the progress they had made in fostering understanding between humans and Sheliak. This new role could take that work to the next level, bringing their species together not just in the classroom but in the lab and the workshop as well. "I'm honored," Austin said, his voice thick with emotion. "I accept." Casserole chittered with delight. "Excellent," he said. "We'll make the arrangements. You'll be splitting your time between your diplomatic duties and your new role at Zorthak, but I have no doubt you'll excel at both." Austin spent the following weeks immersing himself in his new position, working closely with Sheliak and human colleagues to tackle complex engineering challenges. Their first major project was a daunting one, designing a new type of spacecraft that incorporated both human and Sheliak propulsion technologies. The team worked tirelessly, poring over schematics and simulations, debating the merits of different designs. Austin found himself marveling at the ingenuity of his Sheliak colleagues, their unique perspectives and approaches to problem-solving. But the project was not without its challenges. Compatibility issues between human and Sheliak systems threatened to derail their progress, and cultural misunderstandings led to heated arguments and frayed tempers. Austin often found himself serving as a mediator, drawing upon the lessons he had learned from the educational initiative to bridge the gaps and keep the team focused on their shared goal. As the weeks turned into months, the spacecraft began to take shape. Austin watched in awe as the sleek, gleaming vessel emerged from the workshop, a testament to the power of human-Sheliak cooperation. The final tests were grueling, pushing the spacecraft to its limits, but it performed beautifully, exceeding even their most optimistic projections. The day of the launch arrived, and Austin stood alongside his team, his heart swelling with pride as the spacecraft lifted off, its engines roaring against the alien sky. As it disappeared into the heavens, Austin felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Lyra, her eyes shining with emotion. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it." Austin nodded, his throat tight. He thought of his journey, from a lone human engineer on a remote outpost to a key figure in shaping the future of human-Sheliak relations. He thought of the lives he had saved, the bonds he had forged, the barriers he had broken down. And as he watched the spacecraft soar higher and higher, a bright beacon of hope and unity, Austin knew that his actions had not only changed his own life, but had helped to build a brighter future for both species. The work was far from over, but they had taken the first steps on a path that would lead them to the stars together. As Austin and Lyra worked tirelessly to promote cooperation between humans and Sheliak, a new threat emerged from within Sheliak society itself. The Zorkash, a radical Sheliak faction, began to gain support, preaching Sheliak supremacy and calling for the subjugation of other species. Led by the charismatic and ruthless Kazavor, the Zorkash saw Austin and Lyra's presence as an affront to their beliefs and a threat to the Sheliak way of life. Tensions rose as the Zorkash staged protests and demonstrations against human-Sheliak cooperation. They marched through the streets of the capital, their carapaces gleaming under the alien sun, their voices raised in angry chants. "Sheliak for Sheliak!" they cried, their mandibles clicking in agitation. "Expel the humans from our world!" Austin and Lyra, along with their Sheliak allies, worked to counter the Zorkash's message of hate and division. They spoke at public forums, met with community leaders, and organized events to promote understanding and tolerance. But despite their efforts, the Zorkash's influence continued to grow, fueled by fear, prejudice, and a desire for power. One evening, as Austin and Lyra attended a diplomatic reception at the Sheliak Grand Hall, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Screams and the sound of shattering glass filled the air. Austin rushed to the window, his heart pounding, and saw a group of Zorkash protesters clashing with security forces. "We need to get out of here," he said, turning to Lyra. But before they could move, a figure burst through the crowd, a glinting object clutched in its appendages. "Death to the human invaders!" the figure screeched, raising the object high. It was a plasma pistol, its muzzle glowing with deadly energy. Time seemed to slow as the assassin aimed the weapon at Austin. He froze, his mind racing, his body refusing to move. Suddenly, a blur of blue carapace and silver exoskeleton slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. The plasma bolt seared the air above his head, missing him by inches. Austin looked up, his eyes widening in horror. Lyra lay beside him, her body convulsing, a gaping wound in her chest. Blue ichor pooled beneath her, staining the polished floor. "No!" Austin screamed, gathering Lyra in his arms. He barely registered the sounds of fighting, the shouts of the security forces as they subdued the assassin. All he could see was Lyra's face, her compound eyes dimming, her life slipping away. At the medical facility, Austin paced the hallways, his mind reeling. How could this have happened? How could the Zorkash's hatred have taken root so deeply, so quickly? He thought of all the progress they had made, all the bridges they had built. Now, it seemed as fragile as a spider's web, ready to be torn apart by the winds of fear and ignorance. As Lyra fought for her life, Austin met with Sheliak leaders, his voice heavy with sorrow and anger. "We cannot let the Zorkash win," he said, his fists clenched. "We cannot let their hatred destroy everything we've worked for." But even as he spoke, Austin knew that the situation had become untenable. The risk to human lives was too great, the Zorkash's influence too strong. With heavy hearts, he and the Sheliak leaders made the decision to temporarily suspend the joint initiatives and evacuate the human presence from the homeworld. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Kazatar, Zortak, and other Sheliak allies gathered to bid Austin farewell. In a somber ceremony, they presented him with a small, intricately carved stone, a symbol of the bond they shared and the challenges they had overcome together. Kazatar, his voice heavy with emotion, placed the stone in Austin's hand. "You will always be one of us, Austin Lewis," he said, his mandibles quivering. "Your bravery and compassion have touched the lives of countless Sheliak, and we will never forget what you have done for our people. May your journey lead you to a brighter future, and may our paths cross again in a time of peace." Austin clutched the stone to his chest, tears welling in his eyes. He looked out at the gathered Sheliak, at the faces of those who had become his friends, his family. He thought of Lyra, still fighting for her life, and of the countless others who had been touched by their work. As he boarded the spacecraft that would take him back to Earth, Austin cast a final glance at the Sheliak homeworld. A mixture of sadness, hope, and determination swelled in his heart. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that the Zorkash's hatred would not be easily overcome. But he also knew that the bonds he had forged with the Sheliak would endure, that together they would find a way to build a future of understanding and cooperation, no matter the obstacles they faced. With a heavy sigh, Austin turned his gaze to the stars, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He clutched the stone tighter, feeling its warmth against his skin, a reminder of all that he had accomplished and all that was still to come. His journey was far from over, but he knew that he had made a difference, and that knowledge gave him the strength to carry on. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.